Hey everyone, let's talk about traps. Let's talk about chess tactics and how we can exploit the best traps in our own games. We'll start off with a fishing pole trap. If you're kind of interested by the name, well, we're going to be baiting our opponent like we bait a fish. The game starts off very simply, e4, we play e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, standard Ruy Lopez, knight f6, castles. Now, how many of you have had this position in your games? I know I've had it at least 500 times. Here, we're playing knight g4. Well, I'm sure you haven't played this move very often. Here is where we're setting the bait for our opponent. And they bite. They play h3. Well, they haven't bitten just yet. But now, we're really taunting our opponent here. We're giving them a knight. Why is this good for them? Well, why is it good for us? For them, they're taking a free knight. But if the opponent takes the bait, if they play h takes g4, oh no, that's a blunder. We play pawn takes g4. The knight has to move. Wherever the knight moves, it doesn't matter. Our rook is opened up. And guess who's coming to visit? The queen. White is in shambles here. What can white do to defend? I'm sorry, they cannot do anything. If they try to get some space for their king, oh no, we're shutting that down immediately. We're playing g3. The white king has nowhere to go. There's nothing for white to do. They can just take the knight. It doesn't even matter. We have two checkmates on the board here. You can pick your own preference of the checkmates. Okay, that was one move that white could have done with the knight. What if they play knight here? It doesn't matter. We can still play queen h4. And white just has nothing they can do. They have absolutely nothing to do. Whichever move they play, again, we shut the door by playing this very, very critical move g3. It doesn't even matter. They move their rook. They move the king. Our knight is coming to block again. There's nowhere for white to go. Our pieces are working so beautifully. They're blocking everything in white's path. And there's nothing for white to do here. It's very resignable. There's no defense against checkmate. It is forced checkmate. Again, how did this trap happen? It's very common when our opponent has castled. We kind of bait with a piece, with a minor piece, when our rook is facing immediately at the enemy king. So in this case, we're playing h5. The opponent takes as they think it's a free piece. This happens very often. It's never a good time. It's never easy to know when you can take the free piece because sometimes this trap won't work, but it's very difficult to know when. And most opponents won't even know that. So if our opponent simply takes a knight, well, it doesn't matter where they move. Again, very, very nasty trap. Keep in mind. So keep this idea in mind in your games. When your rook is facing the opponent, your queen can simply join the attack, and that's all she wrote, basically. That's the fishing pole trap. Now let's move on to the next trap. We will be looking at the Lasker trap, named after Emanuel Lasker, famous world champion and very esteemed chess grandmaster in the 1900s. Move order is pretty basic: d4, d5, c4, standard queen's gambit. But here we're being a bit more aggressive. We're playing e5. Again, we're kind of taunting our opponent. Let's see what he does. In this case, if your opponent plays d takes e5, then we thrust the pawn forward. Why is this an important move? Well, as we'll see, if the opponent plays kind of a standard move like e3, trying to attack our pawn, then we play bishop b4. And the importance of this pawn comes to life as it's blocking, or rather it's preventing white from blocking with the knight on c3. In this case, if white is ambitious and plays bishop d2, attacking our own bishop, so threatening it in a way, as our black bishop is unprotected, then we can play this nasty move e3. And if white is to take our bishop on b4, then again we can play e takes f2. Oh man, we're absolutely exploiting this white position. Now there's two moves here. The king can take, or the king can kind of sidestep. If the king sidesteps, then we can take, it seems like a free piece, but that's not where it ends. We can take this knight, but more importantly, look at these three pieces. So our white bishop and the white king and the white queen, they're all in the same diagonal. And if our bishop was to get here, make sure you spot these kind of tactics. We would simply just win the white queen. So however, the white knight would be blocking that now. So what we need to do is we need to take this knight. And more importantly, we need to take it with check. We under promote to a knight. Why is it important we take it with check? Because by taking it with check, we're forcing white to respond to us. And we're not letting white just simply grab our queen here and try and liquidate the position and then take our knight, which would then kind of let white off the hook. So we take, again, we take the knight with a pawn. We under promote to a knight. We give a check. If the rook takes, as we said, we have a very, very nasty way to win the queen here. But what happens if instead, obviously, if white is going to take here, then we're simply just winning a queen. But what happens in the case where white does not take the knight with a rook, but instead white decides to move back? Well, here our position is so winning, we can play queen h4. If white tries to block, then we can simply win the rook. Otherwise, if they try to escape, then we can start developing our pieces. We attack this bishop. Depending on where they move, then we can attack the queen, then we can castle. There's everything going so well here for black, and white has no pieces out. All these pieces are kind of sleeping in their bunkers, and this is a very, very nasty trap. Again, what is the pattern we're learning from these traps? We're exploiting white's position, and we're getting our pieces out quickly. In this case, we're exploiting the very critical f2 square. Keep in mind, this f2 square and this f7 square are only protected by the king. So if you can attack them somehow, the king would be forced to take or move, which would then expose our enemies into an even worse position. So keep that in mind as we'll be moving on to our next trap, the Budapest trap, which is a very short trap, but again, it exploits the same things as our previous trap. It exploits these squares, these diagonals. They're only protected by the king. So let's start. d4 by our opponent. We play knight f6. Knight d2 is a bit of a weird move, and it will be important in this game. It is a move, but you have to know how to play the position. And sometimes if our opponents make these kind of random moves, we can immediately punish them. We can play e5 in this position. Okay, it seems like a free pawn. D takes e5. But no, knight g6, or rather knight g4, sorry, in this position. It seems like we're just attacking this pawn to try and win it back. So white would naturally play a move like h3, as I'm sure many of us would. That's a question mark. That's a blunder. That's not the move you should play. Why is that the case? Well, look at white's position for now. It's completely boxed in. This queen has nowhere to move. Why am I saying that? How can we attack the queen? No, we will not take this pawn. We're playing knight e3. We're attacking the queen. The queen is trapped. If white is to take our knight with the pawn, I'm sorry, but queen h4 leads to a checkmate. Just like that, white is lost in this game. Okay, I mean, is there any other way for white to defend? I'm sure maybe some people won't play h3. Yes, indeed, they could play a move like knight f3. But in this case, okay, we can still try and set the trap. We can play bishop e7. We're still trying to entice our opponent to make this h3 move. And when they do, again, we can do the same thing. Even though this knight is defending, we now have two pieces that are attacking there. Again, the same trap, and this time we're giving a checkmate with the bishop. I'm sure you will get this position many times if in your games if the opponent just played this kind of careless move, knight d2. And of course, if white is to take, we're simply capturing with our queen, and the same position follows. Again, we can see in these traps we're exploiting some things, some common areas. In these positions, we're exploiting this square. So often we're exploiting that square. This time it's by forcing white to capture and opening up this diagonal, which again, the king has no protection. It's very limited for the king to have protection here. That's why it's so important to castle your king and not leave it in the center. Okay, this was the Budapest trap. Let's move on to the Monticelli trap. Now, this trap is a combination of the Bogo Indian defense, and it's named for the Italian champion Mario Monticelli from the game Monticelli versus Prokes, which happened in Budapest in 1926. That's a bit of a background for the game. Now, white, so we are going to win an exchange here, but black will get some compensation. However, in most of our games, it's very difficult to make use of that compensation. And most of the time, material simply is king. So it's the best. Let's start the game. d4. Again, it's a bit longer, so bear with me here. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, bishop b4. Now this is the Bogo Indian defense. I'm sure this position happens many times in your games. Very standard opening. Here we're going to block with a bishop, bishop d2, black takes, white takes with a queen. Again, these are all very standard moves. This case, black is playing b6. We're playing g3 ourselves. Bishop b7, bishop g2. This is the first time I'd like to pause in this game. As you can see here, both bishops are undefended. Keep this in mind. Any knight move, any knight here, let's say, would leave our bishop hanging, but it will also kind of, in a way, leave black's bishop hanging if it was our move to make. Okay, let's play the rest of the moves. Black castles. Now white doesn't castle. White plays this move, knight c3. Okay. Black attacks our knight and our queen, kind of forcing us to make a decision here. Do we move the queen? Do we capture the knight? And then black takes, and then position follows. But no. In this case, Monticelli played this move, queen c2. Now, again, we need to look at the weaknesses in the black position. Why is this queen c2 move so good? Well, first of all, it's attacking this knight twice. That's very straightforward. If black was to play a random move, then we would simply just win a knight. Okay. However, black does not play a random move. Black takes our knight on c3. Now, what follows here is a very nasty uncorking of the position. It just explodes everything. Could you find this move? It's knight g5. What a move this is. What a stunner move. First of all, we're threatening checkmate. This is just straight up threatening a checkmate. The black knight is hanging. The black bishop is hanging all the way in b7. I told you, keep in mind, these bishops just stare at each other and are unprotected. And most importantly, as I said, this is just threatening a checkmate. If black is to take the knight, then we're winning the bishop, we're winning the rook in the back as well, we're going to castle our king. Again, black will have some compensation here, but we're just winning so much material. This trap could happen in your games all the time, as there was nothing in these moves that would indicate any blunder of some sort. But just the fact that we're looking at exploiting the weaknesses of black. Again, this knight has moved so many times. It's left the protection of its king. The knight should be protecting its king, should be protecting the h7 square, but it's not. And what the Grandmaster does here, Mr. Monticelli, is He's looking at the weakness that's on h7, and he's looking at the weakness that's on b7. And with one move, he's exploiting both. Keep that in mind in your games. Every time we look at these traps, you need to keep in mind these patterns. You're exploiting the black position here. Keep that in mind in your own games. Furthermore, what could be the case here, by the way, if, let's say, there's a random move being played, like, how could we get a good position here? Let's say knight back. I want to get a position where black is basically playing this h6 move. Then we could employ the fishing pole tactic. So here, if we're playing something like h4, takes, again, look at how we're using the tactic we learned in the beginning, the fishing pole tactic, to again exploit the black position. So keep these tactics in mind in your games. They happen so frequently. Again, we're looking at a very different game here, but the same thing kind of arises in the same way we're attacking here. Maybe this is not a definitive attack, sure, as white would be able to defend maybe, but again, we would try and get our queen over to h4 and simply try and deliver a strong attack or checkmate. So keep these tactics in mind in your games. Okay, and now the last trap I would like to show you is the legal or legal trap. A very short trap. The move e4, e5, knight f3. Here, white plays d6, kind of a different opening, playing easy moves here. Bishop c4. Now black is trying to pin us. They're playing bishop g4. They're saying, hey, you don't get to move your knight. If you move your knight, you lose your queen. Yeah, okay. We play knight c3. Now black plays g6. And they're kind of missing the point in this position. This is not as simple as it looks like. Yes, our knight is pinned, but we can still take the pawn. We can still take e5. Knight takes e5 is a wake-up call for black. It's a cold shower. What are you doing? You're not looking at the position. Again, we're exploiting this f7 square. And you might think, okay, there's nothing special there. We're just taking the queen. Fatal mistake. Bishop takes f7. Again, we're exploiting this f7 square. Bishop takes f7. King e7. And what we can do here, the only move is to play knight d5. And I'm sorry, but this is checkmate on the board. At move 7, this is checkmate. There's nothing for black to do here. He can't move. The bishop is blocking these two squares. The knight is blocking this. This other knight is blocking here. Our three pieces combined have just checkmated black in 7 moves. And how did this happen? Black fell asleep on the wheel. That's basically what happened. It looked like we were just developing our pieces very normally, as you often do in these games. This diagonal is wide open. There's nothing protecting, well, f7, and there's nothing protecting d5, as black didn't develop this knight. So if your opponent is not developing their pieces, look at how you can exploit these weaknesses. Again, this f7 square is so weak, as is this f2 square. If the colors were reversed, the same thing would be happening, be the case. We play knight takes e5. And of course, if black is to take this, then we're simply in a better position. Sometimes you're not straight up checkmating the opponent, but you get a position that's so good that you would simply just go on to win the game. You're up a pawn here, and you would castle, develop your bishop. You could even castle the other way. And you're in such a comfortable position as black hasn't developed any of their pieces. Okay, that was the traps I had prepared for you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It would help the channel. And please leave a comment on anything I could improve or anything you would like to see. I'd be very happy to take a look at those. And I'll be making a part 2 of this video in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.